Folks, the deep state's at it again. This time they are going after TENET Media, home of conservative powerhouses Benny Johnson and Tim Pool. The DOJ claims Russian money is behind it all, but here's what they don't want you to know. This is a blatant attempt to silence independent voices. We've got the real story, and trust me, it's not what you're hearing from the mainstream media. So stay tuned as we expose this new sinister plot, but we've heard this story before. Now, as we expose the truth about the attack on TENET Media, it's crucial to protect your own financial future from manipulation. The national debt has surpassed $35 trillion, with the government borrowing just to pay interest. Meanwhile, gold has reached record highs. Just as we fight for truth in media, you need to safeguard your wealth. Don't let mainstream narratives fool you with diversifying. Don't let mainstream narratives fool you. Diversifying with precious metals is key. So if you have funds sitting in a low-interest bank account or a 401k IRA retirement account, you need to call my friends at Global Gold Investments, America's leading conservative precious metals dealer, and receive absolutely free their new 2024 Protect Your Wealth and Retirement Guide. Call that number you see on the screen, 888-700-4148, and mention Next News and receive their 5-star customer treatment along with their complimentary portfolio analysis. Operators are standing by. Call that number, 888-700-4148, or visit IRAGoldproof.com. Remember, if you don't have gold, then you don't have wealth. Now, let's jump right into it, shall we? This is the news that is breaking the feeds today. We've got it all lined up for you. So, the smear campaign is underway. Tim Pool has already reacted. And what's interesting, Caitlin Collins, of course, the mainstream media attack dog, she's already pushing this narrative throughout the mainstream media. 4 hours ago, among the commentators listed on TENET Media's website are right-wing personalities Benny Johnson and Tim Pool. Both have millions of subscribers on YouTube. Both have millions of subscribers in other social media platforms. Pool interviewed Trump on his podcast in May. Didn't you interview Trump too, Caitlin? Shout out to Mark Dice for shooting me a text message about this story. Of course, the mainstream media is in overdrive, and we wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. We've got a tweet thread that's going viral right now. It's got 41,000 views as of this report. Tim Pool and Benny Johnson are now the targets of Mightiest News smear campaign, alleging that their new platform, TENET Media, is part of a Russian propaganda scheme. What are the real facts behind the accusations? Well, according to Mightiest News, a left-wing outlet infamous for attacking conservative voices, TENET Media, featuring Johnson, Pool, Lauren Southern, and others, was secretly funded by Russia Today, Russia's state-controlled media. Big claims, but what is the evidence? Now, the DOJ indictment, unsealed today, names 2 Russian nationals, accusing them of funneling $10 million to TENET Media. Allegedly, this money was used to produce pro-Russian content. But here's where things get sketchy, my friends. TENET Media, owned by Lauren Chen, you might know her as Roaming Millennial, or the Lauren Chen on X, her husband, Liam Donovan. They're an independent platform featuring top conservative commentators, and according to the DOJ, the money was funneled without the commentators knowing the source. Mightiest News is quick to point fingers. How do you even say it? Midas? Whatever. But let's not forget, this is the same outlet that regularly runs hit pieces against conservative personalities. Their bias in reporting is no secret. This latest smear follows a well-worn pattern. The indictment claims that TENET Media received Russian funds through a network of shell companies in Turkey, UAE, but does receiving money, foreign money, unbeknownst to the creators, automatically mean that they're involved in propaganda? No, it doesn't. In fact, Johnson and Pool are only accused of being unknowing participants in the scheme, and the DOJ is not alleging direct collaboration or intentional wrongdoing on their part, yet they spin this as a full-blown scandal. Now, for years, Russia Today has sought ways to influence U.S. public opinion, but targeting popular conservative voices without solid proof is a dangerous game. Benny Johnson and Tim Pool, they were creating independent content long before TENET was even formed. I was even approached to hire Tim Pool years and years ago. Wonder what would have happened if I did. But we didn't hire him. We didn't have a need for a man-on-the-ground reporter at the time. Now, Medias claims that TENET Media is covertly working to spread Russian propaganda, but ironically, the content created by Johnson and Poole is entirely focused on U.S. domestic issues like inflation, immigration, and free speech, hardly Russian talking points. The DOJ also alleges that TENET used shell companies to hide funding sources, but without proof of direct involvement from Johnson, Poole, or other creators. This simply reads as guilt by association. Where is the accountability for those actually at fault? Now, Medias News conveniently ignores that TENET Media is an independent company owned by Shannon Donovan, not some Kremlin puppet. So the smear seems like a desperate attempt to discredit rising conservative voices who threaten the mainstream narrative. And let's not forget how Medias routinely overlooks similar influence efforts from the left. They never seem to question their own ties or the media companies funded by left-wing interest groups. It is clearly selective outrage. The DOJ's indictment mentions 2 unnamed commentators with over 2 million and 1.3 million YouTube subscribers, allegedly Johnson and Poole, but the only thing these numbers confirm is their massive influence, which the left despises. The content at TENET created by Johnson and Poole is aimed at discussing the real problems Americans face. So why would they need foreign money to boost their message? Their success is based on truth and transparency, not propaganda. The real question here is the DOJ indictment more about discrediting successful conservative platforms than about catching real criminals? It would not be the first time we've seen politically motivated investigations. Medias News and their allies are pushing this narrative to undermine TENET Media just as it's gaining traction. Why? Because they can't stand seeing independent right-wing platforms thrive outside corporate control. And according to the DOJ, the funds were intended to create discord on issues like U.S. foreign policy and immigration. Yet the content coming from TENET speaks to the reality of American life, not some Russian-fed narrative. It's clear that Benny Johnson and Tim Poole, along with other commentators on TENET, were unknowingly caught up in something larger, but that does not make them guilty. This is just another attempt by the left to smear the reputation of conservative voices. At the end of the day, this is about silencing free speech and independent thought. Johnson and Poole have stood strong against censorship, and this smear campaign is just another obstacle they will overcome, and the truth will win. Don't let biased outlets like Medias News fool you. Benny Johnson, Tim Poole, and the team at TENET Media will continue to speak the truth despite the attacks, so stay tuned as this story develops. And we have more. I got a little bonus for you, because it's funny how history repeats itself. Next News Network, our channel here, was accused of spreading Russian disinformation right after Trump's 2016 win by the Washington Post, by the New York Times, The Guardian, but we've never been accused of receiving foreign money. So this is a new twist. And here is a couple headlines that broke right after Trump won. These were all targeting our channel specifically. Tim Poole has issued a response, and so has Benny Johnson. Benny Johnson said, a year ago, a media startup pitched my company to provide content as an independent contractor. Our lawyers negotiated a standard arm's-length deal, which was later terminated. We are disturbed by the allegations in today's indictment, which make clear that myself and other influencers were victim of the alleged scheme. My lawyers will handle anyone who suggests otherwise. So here is Tim Poole reacting to the allegations just a few hours ago.
And now I guess this is Tim Week in the news, because I'm just in the news all the time. Now, admittedly, it wasn't my fault that the Harris campaign accused me of calling for what is tantamount to genocide of Democrats. That's a lie, by the way. And we are currently in the process of drafting our formal complaint. We will be filing a lawsuit. But now news broke. The DOJ said that there's this RT employees were covertly funding a U.S. company publishing thousands of videos in furtherance of Russian interests. And it is presumed that company is TENET Media. For those who aren't familiar, this is a new media company, and we license one of our shows, Culture War, to them. And now I'm getting hit up by like everybody in the media. They're emailing me and they're tweeting at me and sending me DMs being like, what's going on with this? Well, I'll make clear immediately in the start of the show. Did you read the indictment? It clearly says that I, as well as the other personalities, were victims. We were deceived by people intentionally to trick us into licensing our content to them. I will add, I have a statement about this, which, we'll launch the full segment, but we never produced anything for them. We had an existing show that was already in production that they licensed distribution for, which meant that the show that we already produced appeared on their network. That was the gist of the deal. So there's no one from their company involved with ours. Their company paid a license fee to broadcast a show that we produce, that we run, that our employees are involved with, and they have nothing to do with. I don't know what, politically, you're going to see a bunch of Democrats making claims and all this other stuff. I can't speak for anybody else involved in the company because I don't know what they do or what their jobs are or anything like that. I can just tell you plainly, culture war existed well before the license agreement. It will exist well after the license agreement, and they licensed it for a set period, and that meant that the show appeared on their channel. That's it. Like any other show appearing on any other network, we produce it on our own. So we'll talk about that. And
So there you have it. Tim Pool's response. Of course, the mainstream media already in full attack mode. Libs of TikTok posting this clip. As Trump surges in the polls, the Biden administration is now accusing Russia of interfering in our elections and are taking serious actions to counter it. Yes, it's a story we've heard before.
Officials. Breaking news, the Biden administration taking a series of actions to target what they allege are attempts by Russian-backed actors to manipulate public opinion here in the U.S. ahead of the presidential election, according to two senior U.S. officials. Joining us now is NBC's Ken Delanian. Ken, what more have we learned?
What have we learned?
Jose, this is being described by our sources as a whole-of-government action designed to target Russian propaganda and
a whole-of-government reaction.
Disinformation aimed at interfering in the 2024 election. It is said to include sanctions by the Treasury Department, law enforcement action by the Justice Department, and one of the focuses is on RT, formerly known as Russia Today, that network of Russian government-funded English-language websites and television platforms that was flagged all the way back in 2017 by the U.S. intelligence community as a vehicle for Russian disinformation and election interference. And at that time, the Justice Department required RT to register as a foreign agent. It remains to be seen exactly what actions the U.S. will take against RT today, but this does appear to represent an escalation in the efforts to try to purge the system of Russian propaganda and
escalation. Russian propaganda, dropping the big buzzwords.
Information. What's interesting is that, look, the U.S. has been saying all along that not only Russia, but Iran and China, but particularly Russia, has been consistently trying to manipulate American public opinion with disinformation on social media platforms, use of fake accounts, and through RT, through its state-sponsored platforms, as they did in 2016. The difference now is that there are mechanisms in place, particularly on the social media platforms, to try to stop and flag fake accounts before the influence operations spread too widely. So it remains to be seen what impact this Russian disinformation is having. But nonetheless, this is a stance by the Biden administration to say if you're violating U.S. laws and policies, we're going to come after you. And Attorney General Merrick Garland is expected to chair a meeting of the government's election task force today, this afternoon, with FBI Director Chris Wray and other officials, and he may have public comments to make about this effort.
And we do have those public comments from Merrick Garland today. Here's Simon Ateba, who live streamed the event earlier.
We launched election content as, quote, bogus stories disguised as newsworthy events, close quote. This malign influence campaign has been referred to as doppelganger. The Russian public relations company drove viewers to these websites by deploying influencers and paid social media advertisements. They also created fake social media profiles, posing as U.S. citizens, post comments on social media platforms with links to the sites. According to SDA's records, it actively sought to, quote, eliminate the possibility of detection of the Russian footprint. Both of the schemes I've just discussed make clear the ends to which the Russian government, including at its highest levels, is willing to go to undermine our democratic process. But the enforcement actions I've discussed also make clear that the Justice Department will aggressively counter such efforts. In today's, quote, the explosive device impacted in impeachments, trainings, tabletop for attempts by authoritarian regimes.
Okay, so you get the point. This is the same playbook we heard in 2016. Charlie Kirk coming out. Attorney General Merrick Garland details the Justice Department Election Threat Task Force. The task force is marshaling the full resources of the Justice Department. Merrick Garland says Russia is trying to interfere with the 2024 presidential election. Intelligence agencies are on high alert. Here's CNN, a headline there, U.S. to accuse Russia of trying to influence the 2024 election. And that's what they're doing. The Health Ranger just 8 hours ago, Mike Adams, he said that the DOJ announced a seizure of 32 domains and named 10 specific individuals, all with Russian-sounding names, it appears, claiming they were involved in an influence campaign to interfere with U.S. elections or to overall influence Americans. He says he posts the link below, but let me ask you all a question. Have you heard of any of these companies or websites named our Doppelganger, Anno, Tabak? Does this ring a bell with any of you all? I consider myself very well informed on geopolitics. I've interviewed hundreds of people each year, and I've never heard of any of these names, websites, or people. Of course, I'm aware of the existence of RT and Sputnik. I'm aware of Al Jazeera or the BBC or China Times or major media outlets in China, Mexico, Taiwan, Japan, or Canada. But seriously, never heard of any of the names or organizations. How much influence could they have really had if people like me have never heard of them? Are some of these actually CIA cutouts, straw men to serve the purpose of being taken down so the DOJ can claim Russian interference? A lot to consider here. Curious to hear Kim.com and his take on this. Now, I dove deep into this Justice Department, the press release. I looked at the names he mentioned. I don't recognize any of them either. So, but of course, the Media News article that Mark Dice brought to my attention clearly brought up the fact that Benny Johnson and Tim Pool are now at the center of this, being smeared and connected to this entire campaign. Again, this is a story we have heard time and time again, and the mainstream media is working overdrive to burn this into the minds of the American people. But like I said in my post, in my thread, this is exactly what they did to me back in 2016, right after the election, when they blamed this channel for helping elect Donald Trump. Mainstream media was out in force attacking me. But now they've got a little bit of a different spin on the whole thing. So the attack on TENET Media isn't just about Benny Johnson or Tim Pool. It's about silencing all of us. This is how they operate. Smear, discredit, destroy, but we won't let them win. So keep supporting independent media. Share the show, spread the truth, because if we don't stand up now, who will be left to speak out tomorrow? Stay vigilant, patriots. The fight for free speech is far from over. So what do you think? Is this smear campaign a coordinated effort to silence conservative voices or just a coincidence? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.